Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi şrah li sadri ve yessir li emri ve hlul ukdeten min lisani yefkahu kavli. Selamun aleyküm ve rahmetullahi ve berekatuh. Inshallah, we will continue with the 19th word. Last few weeks we studied first, second, and third droplets. So inshallah, we will continue with the fourth droplet.
I have a question on the third droplet. I don't know if you discussed this because I didn't listen to the whole thing. What did we talk about the era of bliss? Like when we go back to in time. So why was that the era of bliss? And what about this time? How can we get this era of bliss? Did we discuss that or not?
I don't remember discussing this phrase specifically, era of bliss.
Something that is everybody was during his time in history, everybody was very pleased and happy, right? I guess because of the message the Prophet ﷺ was bringing. And how can we achieve now this era of bliss, I would think.
So great question. I guess we can discuss this before starting the fourth droplet. So Asim, would you like to take the lead? First about your question, and then once we are done, we can continue with the fourth droplet.
No, I mean, I was just looking at the third droplet. I was thinking about how, like the author is taking us to the history. He said, let's go back to the Arabian Peninsula, and he refers to that as the era of bliss, right? This time period in the Arabian Peninsula. And he says, take our imagination, right? And really observe and see how this particular, whatever this message or this messenger, what is the message that he's bringing and sharing, right? And everybody seems to be, why is it being called the era of bliss? Because I guess everybody was very pleased and happy with the message. And how can we become pleased and happy now with this message, now that we are reading and following this discussion session on what prophethood means, right? So I mean, I know like really what is the ultimate message that he is really bringing and sharing, that really we can bring that into our lives and be really pleased and be satisfied. Yeah, and praise the Lord that thank God, there's a messenger that is being sent to us, who is really letting us know why we are here and what our purpose is in this existence. So if anybody wants to further, comment or elaborate on this, that would be great.
So is the era of bliss just in the Prophet's time, or does it continue after?
I would say personally, everybody who is studying can make their own era of bliss, who is really pondering and reflecting on the questions that are listed in the end, and then seeing what the messengership brings to us can make our own world as an era. I mean, our own, this time for us as an era of bliss. But then I guess that needs a lot of work and a lot of discussions, I would say, to really digest it and bring it to our, into our humanity.
As far as, I know that when we look from a historical perspective, I guess the phrase era of bliss, or Asr Saadet in original, I guess it is used to imply that a time period when the message was most alive, and also having the Prophet himself alive within the people, with people, and after him, all the companions who knew him firsthand, like to me, what this reminds is whatever brought forward by Prophet was so alive at that time. Like he was with them. So they had a first-hand experience of interacting with the message. And also the message was so integral in their life. There was no such thing, for instance, their religious life and worldly life, which is true for us, I guess, like for many of us. We try to somehow integrate the religion, as we understand, into our worldly life. So it is kind of external to us. It's something that we are trying to follow, or that is something we're trying to catch. It is in front of us or ahead of us, and we're trying to catch it. This is how we live. But for them, it was so integral. Like everything they do was part of religion for them. It was part of the message. The way they drink water, for instance, was explained by some verses, some sunnah, some like it was part of the message they received. But for us, I think it's not that alive, that integral, unfortunately. So that's what it reminds me when I read the era of bliss. Like having Prophet with me, living with me, next to me, side by side. Like I don't have to struggle by myself. I'm not alone. That's what it reminds me.
Yeah, I mean, that's very nice if the Prophet is by my side, and really what you're saying, Berkan, so that we don't really feel the way we are in this world, isolated and really stressful in the life situations that everybody's going through in this kind of civilization. Like having that connection through the messenger and then connecting to your Lord, but definitely through the messengership is the way one can achieve that particular, connection with their Lord. So we really need that, at least in this time period. At least for personally, I can say, yeah, I definitely need that.
So I guess in parallel or to what you said earlier, we can ask the question, when is it for us, this era of bliss? Like when I feel like I am living in the era of bliss of my lifetime. So I guess for all of us, there are some moments that we feel being blessed, being happy, like peaceful with us, with ourselves. Surrounded by people we love most, surrounded by people we value most, not because they are good friends or they're family, but the moments that we feel the people around us or ourselves carrying us to the point that we want to reach. I want to believe that we all have such moments in our lives. Like, I don't know, like a simplest example would be coming together with people for, let's say, for a retreat, or spending a few hours studying something, or thinking something, or by yourself, like just waking up, realizing that you are alive, being thankful for that. These moments are, I guess, just a glimpse of, or little examples of having this or living in this era of bliss. Like feeling that what you do, what you are going through is not for nothing. It's taking you somewhere. You have the you have the security of having the Prophet or having the message next to you, with you.
So this blissfulness or happiness, I mean, in our time, how do we say that? What are we happy with? Right? One has to think, like, what really makes us pleased and happy in our existence? I need to think more on this, because the happiness gets confused in this particular, the way our lives are right now. For moments I may be happy with the temporal things, but then what is the real happiness that at least this author is really pointing to?
So if there are no other comments on this part, I would recommend continuing with the fourth droplet. What do you think? Maybe people saying yes, at least like on our side. Okay, we can continue with the fourth droplet since nobody says something like other than this. Is there any volunteers to read the part? Aisha, would you like to read the fourth droplet for us? No? Okay. What about you, Maya? Would you like to?
No.
Would you?
No, there are
Okay.
okay.
So Abdurrahman, would you like to read the fourth droplet for us? And also maybe fifth droplet, fourth and fifth? If you don't mind, of course.
For you, I'd read it for sure.
Jazakallah.
Fourth droplet. See, he spreads such a light of truth that if you look at the universe as being outside the luminous sphere of his truth and guidance, you see it to be like a place of general mourning and beings strangers to one another and hostile, and inanimate beings to be like ghastly corpses, and living creatures like orphans weeping at the blows of death and separation. Now look, through the light he spreads, that place of universal mourning has been transformed into a place where God's names and praises are recited in joy and ecstasy. The foreign, hostile beings have become friends and brothers, while the dumb, dead, inanimate creatures have all become familiar officials and docile servants. And the weeping, complaining orphans are seen to be either reciting God's names and praises or offering thanks at being released from their duties. Fifth droplet. Also, through his light, the motion and movement of the universe and its variations, changes and transformations cease being meaningless, futile, and the playthings of chance. They rise to being dominical missives, pages inscribed with the signs of creation, mirrors to the divine names, and the world itself becomes a book of the eternally besought one's wisdom. Man's boundless weakness and impotence make him inferior to all other animals, and his intelligence, an instrument for conveying grief, sorrow, and sadness, makes him more wretched. Yet when he is illumined with that light, he rises above all animals and all creatures. Through entreaty, his illuminated impotence, poverty, and intelligence make him a petted monarch. Due to his complaints, he becomes a spoiled vicegerent of the earth. That is to say, if it were not for his light, the universe and man and all things would be nothing. Yes, certainly such a person is necessary in such a wondrous universe. Otherwise, the universe and firmaments would not be in existence.
Okay, let's do it. So, yeah, the fourth droplet. Let's see. I'm going to read it again, inshallah. So, the author is asking us to pay attention. He's saying, see, he spread such a light of truth, right? So, here referring to the Prophet Muhammad, right? He spread such a light of truth. So, now what is that light of truth? So, that would be my first question, right? And that could be open. And then just to continue, that if you look at the universe as being outside the luminous sphere of His truth and guidance, if you look at the universe as being outside the luminous sphere of His truth and guidance, you see it to be like a place of general mourning, and beings strangers to one another and hostile, and inanimate beings to be like ghastly corpses, and living creatures like orphans weeping at the blows of death and separation. So if this light of truth is missing, this is how the world that we are seeing would become. Things would become meaningless. Everything seems like fighting against each other, right? And everything leaves us. It's transitory and it's always disappointing us, right? Strangers to one another and hostile. And things are coming and going. And you see death all around you happening, right? Because of the transitoriness of this world. Yeah, so the light of truth is saying that, from what I see, based on this description, that nothing really is without a purpose, or nothing really is the way it seems, in terms of there is something missing if I see the universe as such, where it's very sad and everything is just leaving me, and it's all kind of a very discouraging and disappointing universe. But that universe that I may perceive as disappointing and sorrowful, if I get that light of truth, because all these things of universe definitely cannot be meaningless. Otherwise, why would they be existing like that? Right? So definitely this light of truth is bringing some value to the way the universe is working, or the way it's being, is operating, and the way the things are coming and going. So there is a value in it for me, or the human being, the observer, to understand and get something from it. And I think that's what he says in the next phrase, where he says, now look, through the light he spreads. So how the messenger spreads the light, basically clearing things up for me, trying to make sense, putting the sense of understanding in me, that look at the universe and see how meaningful it becomes, if at least by following what this light is telling me. That through the light he spreads, that place of universal mourning has been transformed into a place where God's names and praises are recited in joy and ecstasy. Now this is very, very strange to me, that instead of the other state of the universe, where everything was sorrowful and sad and ugly, now he's saying with this light, there is joy and ecstasy. Everything that is in this universe is actually a place where God's name and praises are recited in joy and ecstasy. So the foreign hostile beings have become friends and brothers. Right, so what was hostile now are like friends and brothers, while the dumb, dead, inanimate creatures have all become familiar officials and docile servants. And the weeping, complaining orphans are seen to be either reciting God's names and praises, or offering thanks at being released from their duties. So even the death is no longer that sad, because it is actually praising, as it says, God's names, and offering thanks at being released from their duties. So it's interesting, in this light he mentions the connection with God's names twice in this paragraph. I see that. So everything that is in this universe is connected to its creator, right? So that's how God's names is prevalent or is there in this universe that one has to see. And that's how this view, the whole worldview changes for this universe. So I'm open to comments and suggestions and additions, please.
One thing I want to say, like, the author uses such descriptions, the portrayals, like almost everywhere. He talks about how everything being hostile or enemy for us. He talks about this place of general mourning, everything being stranger to each other. So when I first started reading the text, the author, I thought, he was just dramatizing things, like giving us a sadly description, so that he can grasp us, gain our attention, interest. But nowadays, when I look at myself, like how my mind is occupied with all these problems at work or, in life in general, when I find myself thinking about people, fighting with the people in my mind, even though they are, miles away, even though they are not even, aware what's happening in my mind. When I spend hours, sometimes days, to argue with them, not only with people, like when I using my computer, something happens to, something goes wrong and I almost break my computer out of anger. Like, or I eat something and I don't like the taste and I start shouting either outwardly or keeping inside, complaining about things. I guess this is so internal in my life. It's so central. Most of the times I find myself complaining about something. Like my shoes, my shoelaces. Something is there for me to complain. And when it comes to people, I guess it's, I don't even have to think. Like I don't have to spend some time to find such examples because they're always there in my mind, actively. Fighting with people constantly. So when I ask myself, like, do I really need such a light to transform my life, transform my reality, take all these hostile events, things that I complain about, things that I fight with constantly, and transform them into sisters and brothers, like docile, lovely servants who are there to serve me first and foremost, to show me the path, to teach me about myself. Yes, I guess the answer is yes, I need such a light. I need such a light. And he says light of truth is important. Asim was asking at the beginning why it is important, because when I ask for such a light, such a transformation, I don't want it to be a made-up creation, made-up perception of the reality. I do not want to trick myself. I don't want to believe something is not real just to please my heart. Or let's say, try to please my heart. Because I know deep inside that nothing but truth can please my heart. If you come up with a made-up story, trying to convince me that, oh yeah, because there are these and that, you complain constantly or you have a struggle with the problems with, and then give me a cover-up story, I don't know, which is not part of the reality, just a story to make me happy. I don't want such a transformation. I want to see the real face of the things that will be, that will make me happy. I guess, yes, I need the light to illuminate my reality, but I also want it to be a light of truth. I don't want a baseless story, baseless makeup for the reality. What they call is sugar coating. I don't want such thing, right? I want to, for instance, like one problem I always face, like what is my value? Like this is my biggest enemy, my biggest problem. What is my value? Because I constantly find myself trying to find my value in other people's perceptions about me. Like I try to make them happy, try to convince them that I am valuable. So, and most of the times I feel myself as valueless. This is what gives me misery most of the time. And I want this light of truth comes and illuminate myself, my soul, and show me that I have value. This is my value. Not sugarcoating my weaknesses or my impotence and give me a made-up value, but no, I want to know my real value. So I need a light of truth in my life. Anything from you?
I am thinking about this light of truth as so it is illuminating a case, so it's not like a made-up case, right? So it's not coming up with stories that's going to soothe my problems, but it's telling me something real that makes sense to me. So in this sense, because I'm thinking about why is he mentioning the fourth droplet? Since the beginning, he was saying that let's first see if this man is trustworthy, if this is the man that we are looking for. And now he is counting this fourth droplet as a proof that he is really the man that I'm looking for as an evidence of truth. So then the light that he brings, being a real solution to my problems, becomes an evidence for me that this is the man that I was looking for.
So transformation you experience from hostile world to peaceful world is your evidence.
So what you're saying is whatever was hostile, whatever seemed to us like an enemy, actually are friends and are actually helping us. Right? Is that what you're saying? Did I get that right? Based on what the email Berkan sent? Like who do you hate the most or something along those lines? And how do we get that, transform that hate into something more, something familiar and something that is actually helping us in our development?
I guess there's something really interesting here. The way we think about dealing with problems is there are different strategies, there are different approaches, but I guess at the base, what they share is there's something wrong in your life, there's somebody attacking you, let's say, or there's something that you complain about. What you should do, first you have to accept that this is the case, and then you should try to find some strategies to deal with it. For instance, you may try to build a anlaşmak, You come to an agreement with the person, the other party. You compromise, he or she compromise. Like you come to a middle point. So what you do, you try to find like a point of peace between two of us, two of you. And this is how we deal with the problems. We have an enemy, and we say, okay, I have to protect myself. He or she also has to protect himself. So we should find the middle ground between two of us. But here, author says something fundamentally different. He says, there was an enemy, as you see at least. And then he says, if you follow the light of prophet, the thing that you thought, assumed to be enemy, will become your, let's say, best friend. But this is not finding a middle ground. This is not finding, reaching an agreement between two parties. It's, I don't know, it's too like a big of a claim. Like everything you complain about will be a treasury for you, will be something beneficial for you, that you will be pleased, you will be thankful. That leads to me like this is very interesting approach. So I guess this goes back to the problem of evil, which possibly we cannot discuss here right now, but like if this is true what he's saying here, it's short, like it simply means there's nothing bad in creation. Like everything you interact with, if they are there to serve you, even the things that you thought being most hostile, there's a wonderful, believable or unbelievable, possible or impossible, but a wonderful picture of the reality. Wonderful description of the reality.
Yeah, you're right. That's very, very interesting, because you said there's no, like, even in a contract, you come to like a reconciliation between the two people. But this is like a totally opposite scenario, like a hostile becoming something that is a friendly. It's like a total flip of understanding, right? I would say like a revolutionary kind of scenario. Okay, so is there any more comment on the fourth droplet before we move on to the fifth? Okay, I'll continue with the fifth droplet. Also, through his light, the motion and movement of the universe and its variations, changes and transformations cease being meaningless, futile, and the playthings of chance. So the motions and movement of the universe, whatever the changes, transformations, they are no longer meaningless or worthless for no purpose, or just happening randomly and making no sense because they're random. But the light sheds that is spread on this particular motion and movement of the universe actually shows that they are not that. They are not at all playthings of chance, or it highlights them. So through the light, they rise to being dominical missives. So all these motion and movement of the universe, they become dominical missives. That is, they are bringing a message to me, the observer, right? So all these motions and movements are bringing a message, and a message is dominical missive, so it is cannot be from this universe, but the message points to something that is not of the universe. That's what I understand from dominical missive. So it's not the universe has the meaning, like is giving the meaning, but it is the meaning points to a dominical thing, something that is not within the universe. Pages inscribed with the signs of creation. So the universe is seen as pages, like in a book, as an analogy, inscribed with the signs of creation. Just like one is reading a book and looking at the pages and looking at the words and the inscriptions, this whole universe is also similar to that, where one can see all the inscriptions, whatever is in existence in creation, as being signs of creation and mirrors to the divine names. So everything is reflecting the divine names. And the world itself becomes a book to the eternally besought one's wisdom. So the world itself becomes a book to the eternally besought one's wisdom. So every motion, movement is like pages. So every part of our life is a page of the book that we are writing for ourselves. Every moment is like a page. And that's how the whole universe becomes a book that has to be read and studied and, pondered over. And that is being referred to as the book of the eternally besought one's wisdom. Anybody wants to comment before I move on to the next sentence?
So there's one thing I want to share, or maybe question. He says the motion and movement of the universe and its variations, changes and transformations cease being meaningless, futile, and playthings of chance. Again, I was asking myself, like, when I feel this way, when I feel as if I'm at hands of these blind forces, like a plaything of chance. And unfortunately, I guess answer is whenever I think about my past and present, and whenever I try to predict my future, like I ask myself, like, yes, I did this, I did that, or this happened and then that happened, and I happened to be here doing this, doing that. And I ask questions like, what is the point? I was before, dealing with this, now I'm dealing with that. Like, everything in my life is constantly changing. Where I live, what I eat, what I drink, how I dress, to whom I have to interact with, whom I have to deal with. It's constantly changing, and most of the times I don't see the point, like where all these things take me. Like, after all these experiences, where I am, and where am I going to be after, let's say, 5 years, 10 years? These cliche question they ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? And the real question is nowhere. Like, I don't know. I don't know where all these changes in my life taking me. As if it's really just a chance. When I, for instance, look how I end up with the work I'm doing right now or coming to US, it was just chance. Right? I had a friend who knew someone who happened to be asking for someone as a postdoc. I found myself here. Like there was no grand scheme. It was just coincidence, let's say. Like when you listen people who apparently achieved like all this big stuff, they always have stories, right, to back up their success. Always. Like one day my mother talked to me this, and then after that I decided to this and that and so on. I studied. I don't know. Like sometimes I make a joke like the only reason I will not receive a Nobel Prize because I don't have a story to back up it. Like every Nobel literate, what they say? Laureate. They always have a story. Like the point they reach, they knew when they were very young. This is at least how they tell us. When it comes to me, like my life is not a coherent story. Some things happen and then another thing happens just out of chance. So yeah, I just wanted to share the misery.
Yeah, thank you for that reflection. Okay, so if anybody else wants to comment, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to continue reading. So the next sentence says, man's boundless weakness and impotence make him inferior to all other animals. So man's boundless weakness and impotence make him inferior to all other animals. And his intelligence, which is an instrument for conveying grief, sorrow, and sadness, makes him more wretched. So this, I assume, is when there is no light, that man's state is more of a weak and impotent because everything is without meaning. There is no reflection of divine name, as if there is no creator for them. So there is weakness and impotence, and man can fall to really lower than the animal. And his intelligence, or all his human qualities, are just going away, and they just see only the grief, sorrow, and sadness, and just making his state worse. So yet when man is illumined with that light, man rises above all animals and all creatures. So with the light, which gives meaning and connects everything in the universe to their source of existence, or to the divine names, then man can rise above the animals and all creatures. Through entreaty, his illuminated impotence, poverty, and intelligence makes him a petted monarch. His illuminated impotence, poverty, and intelligence make him a petted monarch. Due to his complaints, he becomes a spoiled vicegerent of the earth. That is to say, if it were not for his light, the universe and man and all things would be nothing. Yes, certainly such a person is necessary in such a wondrous universe. Otherwise, the universe and firmaments would not be in existence. That's very interesting that if it was not for this light, the universe and the man and all things would be nothing. So there would be no purpose for the existence of the universe or for man if there was no such light. I think we can discuss that also. But before that, I think Faria has a comment. Faria, you want to read that? No? Okay, Faria says there is a verse along the lines of, with every difficulty there is ease. That is, without doing some groundwork, no one can achieve the light of truth. Without doing some groundwork, no one can achieve the light of truth. After all, we are given existence here to search for such a light and live with it. Yeah, so this last sentence that you have, we are to search for the light. Are we really searching for the light in our existence?
Oh, may I say something? Like I had a question I was planning to ask, and then I listened to Feria's comment, which is also related somehow. So she says, no one can achieve the light of truth. Like no one can achieve light of truth. Like as if the light of truth is something that we should reach ourselves. And my question was something somehow related to this one, like how fourth and the fifth droplet is about the prophet at all. Because except the last sentence of the fifth droplet, last few sentences, anyway, a few sentences, if you replace he with, let's say, the Quran, like the light of Quran, not his light, but Quran's light, I would accept what he says as it is. So how it is about the prophet, not the message only. So how, and question goes like, why he at the end says such a man is required? Because if we read it as it is, what is important is just the message, and at the end it is you who will reach or achieve this message. So the last few sentences, like, do not agree with this understanding. It says, so there needs to be such a man. Not the message, but the man. So how this is about the prophet? And why he says, yes, certainly such a person is necessary. That's my question.
So who's gonna take that question? Should I volunteer, Yusuf?
Which Yusuf? Online
Yeah,
Yusuf.
we have two Yusufs.
Yeah, online Yusuf, I guess. So if online Yusuf, I guess he's busy with his tea, I guess. So I think this is a good question. And at the previous weeks we were talking about whether we can really separate messenger from the message. So I guess we should maybe revisit this again. In my perception of the message, am I able to make sense of the message without the messenger? And how much consistent am I being with that? And we can, first of all, we can speak theoretically, saying that without a teacher, I cannot make sense of theory, because the teacher also teaches me the application or the manifestation of message as a human. Let's put it this way. Because when we say application, sometimes it just exclusively sounds like prayer or whatever, like the rituals. Not only that, but how message is represented as a human. So yeah, in theory, I need such an example so that the message becomes message for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to relate that well with the message. But if you ask the same question in my practical life, how much do I do that? And without trying to learn from the teacher, how much am I really benefiting from the message? I guess this is an open question. Because apparently, according to the author, if this man wouldn't be there, then the message wouldn't be there too for me. And this shouldn't only mean that historically, yes, this man received the message, so yeah, if he was not there, but we can maybe at least hypothesize that the message might have been revealed to the top of a mountain in the form of a book. He will go and grab it and start reading it. But this is not how it happens.
It is interesting. At the very beginning, he mentioned three sources to reach the Creator. He said universe, messenger, and Quran, right? Three sources. And now he says universe would be nothing without him. Like when we hear such like a three sources, when somebody says universe is the speech of the God, we have this attitude of, oh yeah, then I can just listen to this speech, or I can just read this book of the universe. So living is enough. But now he says, without his light, otherwise, or even he says person. Yes, certainly such a person is necessary. Otherwise, the universe wouldn't be in existence. So without him, without prophet, book of universe by itself is not any good. He says nothing. Let me make it softer, since I'm not an alim, but he is. Would be not enough. Wouldn't be enough. That's interesting.
So this statement, the very last statement, isn't it a very big claim, saying that if this man wouldn't exist, then the existent wouldn't exist or shouldn't exist in the first place?
I guess the way I understand it, it's like because the existence of the man is required by the existence of the universe. Like it's like if universe exists, then man exists, because the existence of the universe entails the existence of such a man. And when you break this entailment between these two, you say universe wouldn't exist.
But it sounds like this entailment is if and only, so both sides. It's not like since the universe exists, this man must also exist. So if it was only one way, then you would say that even if he's not there, still the universe might exist.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Like if you say, if sun rises, there will be light. There must be light. If you have such a one direction, if it's like when you say there is no light, you can easily say there is no sun. But anyways, that doesn't matter. If or if and only if. But yes, I guess what he implies that when you accept the existence of the universe, you necessarily accept or you must conclude that there is such a guide. This is what I understand from that. So without existence of such a guide, you cannot comprehend the existence of such a universe. Like you cannot believe that such a universe would exist.
Can we say that if such a man wouldn't exist, then universe would become futile? Because without his light, the universe is becoming like, as he was describing, so pointless, or as if it's nothing. So virtually becomes non-existent. So this is why for the universe to become if universe is something meaningful, which my humanity really yearns for that, it cannot accept a meaningless universe. So if I were to say that the existence should have a meaning, then I would say then there must be such a man. Because with the perspective that is brought by him, everything becomes meaningful.
Yes.
This is I guess Nursin here is interpreting a hadith, which is, some people say that this is like a debatable hadith, or even say that it's not a hadith, whatever, because it sounds very, very big. Saying that if it was not for you, then I wouldn't have created the creation. The Creator says the hadith is in the mouth of the Creator.
So Qudsi hadith.
Hadith Qudsi. It says if it was not for you, then I wouldn't create. And if I haven't created you, or if I haven't made you, if it was not for you, then I wouldn't have created the existence. And the complaint is coming from saying that, well, it's just a single man. A single man for the whole existence, whole universe created for a man, it doesn't make sense. And there have been a lot of other prophets, this and that. So, like 63 years, and this man died away. And if it was for him, okay, he has died. So what's the purpose of creating for the rest of the time either? So it sounds very awkward. So
Now I'm convinced that that is not a hadith.
So then, in here, Nursi is, since the beginning, as he was talking about the messenger as a live tree, so he's not a man for 63 years now, but he's talking about this person, he is talking about the whole live tree, and him being the best representative or the example of this tree. And then not only that tree, but also the functionality of this tree. Because the functionality of this tree is, if I am finding meaning in this life and existence right now, it is because of this tree. It is because that any meaning that I attribute to the existence is a fruit of this tree. So this is why if you take this tree and its fruits out of the existence, the universe, the existence becomes like a corpse, like a dead body. And what do you do with dead body? Bury it under the earth. Because it's dead, it doesn't make any sense. It rots, it smells.
It bothers you.
Yeah.
You need to get rid of it.
Yeah. So in this sense, that Hadith Qudsi is really having a very profound and deep meaning. And you would say that indeed, if it was not for him, then the creation wouldn't or shouldn't have existed in the first place. Just there is this, what is him? The question becomes, what is him?
So should we move on to the sixth droplet, or what do you guys recommend?
You are the moderator, at least our own side. Our side, we are okay with moving to sixth or seventh or eighth droplet.
Personally, I'm still digesting the last two sentences of the fifth droplet. Like how, if there was no message or there is no teacher. So the example Yusuf was giving about the theory that we need, as well as, let's say, chemistry theory that we're studying, but we also need the practical lab to exercise that theory. So they go hand in hand. So to have both that theory and that practical side, we do need an instructor. So it puts the necessity of having an instructor. Otherwise, all those experiments or discoveries, one cannot just go straight to the practical lab without knowing anything about the theory or what they're doing or what they're studying. Right? So everything goes and is tied so tightly that it necessitates each other. So there is actually no practical or there is no theory unless there is an instructor there to tell us about it. So anybody else wants to comment on this specific last two sentences? All right, I guess we can move on then to the sixth droplet. Thus, that being brings and announces the good news of eternal happiness. So that being brings and announces the good news of eternal happiness. He is the discoverer and proclaimer of an infinite mercy. The discoverer and proclaimer. So discover and then announce it, proclaim it. And the mercy is infinite, infinite mercy. The herald and observer of the beauties of the sovereignty of dominicality. So the herald and observer of the beauties of the sovereignty of dominicality. And the discloser and displayer of the treasures of the divine names. So to disclose and display, the discloser and displayer of the treasures of the divine names. So disclosing or letting me know the different divine names that there are. Otherwise, without this instructor, I would not get to know who this divine one is, this source of existence is, or what kind of qualities this source must have. If you regard him in that way, that is, in regard to his being a worshipful servant of God. If you regard him being the messenger in that way, that is, in regard to his being a worshipful servant of God. A worshipful servant of God. You will see him to be the model of love. So that condition is if you regard him as being a worshipful servant of God, then you will see him to be the model of love, the exemplar of mercy. So an example of mercy, the glory of mankind. So the Prophet being the glory of mankind, the example of mercy, the model of love, and the most luminous fruit of the tree of creation. So him being the most luminous fruit of the whole universe or this tree of creation. While if you look in this way, that is in regard to his messengership. While if you look in this way, that is in regard to his messengership, you see him to be the proof of God. While if you look in this way, that is in regard to his messengership. So the messengership, you see him to be the proof of God. Proof of God, because he is, the messengership entails the proof of God. You see him to be the proof of God, the lamp of truth, the sun of guidance. So the lamp of truth, or as previously in the previous droplets, the light of truth, the sun of guidance, and the means to happiness. So through his message, he becomes the means to happiness. And look, his light has lighted up from east to west. His light has lighted up from east to west. Basically, it's spread all over the universe like dazzling lightning. Like dazzling lightning. And half the earth and a fifth of mankind has accepted the gift of his guidance and preserved it like life itself. And half the earth and a fifth of mankind has accepted the gift of his guidance and preserved it like life itself. The gift of his guidance and preserved it like life itself. So how is it that our evil commanding souls, and Satan's do not accept with all its degrees the basis of all such a being claimed that is, the basis of all such a being claimed, that is, there is no God but God. So this messenger and his messengership is claiming that there is no God but God. But the author is saying that how come our evil commanding souls and Satan's do not accept with all its degrees this particular claim that there is no God but God? It's an interesting challenge and question, I would say. What is going on with us that we are not seeing with all its degrees? So this claim is there is no God, but God can be seen in various degrees. So it's not just like in one particular moment I can say, yeah, there is no God but God, but there are degrees to it. And one has to go and try to explore all those different degrees to realize that there is no God but God. All right, I will pause here to hear your comments.
Just one thing, not a comment or question, but I want it to be clear for everyone. So when he says, so how is it that our evil commanding souls and Satan's? So here in English, it's not obvious that the our, when he says our evil commanding souls, this our is also goes to the Satan as well in the original. So it is our evil commanding soul and our Satan. So he's not talking about Satan's external entities, things, but our Satans do not accept. Just for clarification. Meanwhile, I can also, I guess, read Feria's comment. She asks, is guidance coming from God or the prophet? Is guidance coming from God or the prophet? She asks. And then she continues asking, or from God through the prophet? Okay, this is what she asked, and since it's beyond my capacity to ask the answer, I'm leaving Mike to ask.
So the question is, Faria, you want to talk about it, or you're asking, is guidance coming from God or the prophet? And I think you answered it in your second question, or from God through the prophet, because I don't see the prophet or the messengerships who is making this claim. There is no God, but God saying that this is from me. He's not even taking, this claim is not coming or giving anything to the messenger. But as being a messenger means that the person is employed and bringing the news or the message to the observers. Okay, so going back to the sixth droplet. So what is the distinction in the middle of the paragraph where when the author says, okay, so first he says that being brings and announces, then he says, if you look in regard to his messengership, you see him to be the proof of God. So does anyone see that? So, okay, he starts off, okay, that being, then in the middle he transitions, says, now if you look in this way, that is in regard to his messengership. Okay, I see. So it is an extension, I see, the way I'm seeing it. So this being, when he's discovering and then he proclaims the infinite mercy and he becomes the announcer or herald and shares whatever his observation is, whatever his discovery is, and whatever he is proclaiming, he proclaims it. And he discloses, so makes me known to whoever he is disclosing, his message basically, discloses the treasures of the divine names. Yeah, so one way is to regard him as as being a worshipful servant of God. Okay, now that makes sense. So in that way, he is giving me an example on how to be worshipful to my creator or source of existence, or being worshipful to God, and thus being, and he will see him to be the model of love, the exemplar of mercy, the glory of mankind, and the most luminous fruit of the tree of creation. So the perfect role model of everything, I would say, in as it pertains to my humanity, to my being with all these different qualities I have, such as the senses and, the physical, as well as my feelings and the non-physical things. So the prophet is being a model and being an example on how I can achieve or such a being like a worshiper of God. Yeah, somebody was saying something. Go ahead.
May I say something? Like, this is a question. So here he separates his servancy, like he's being servant, from his being messengership. Like first he says, if you regard him in that way, that is in regard to his being a worshipful servant. First he's studying his being a servant, abd, and then he says, while if you look in this way, that is in regard to his messengership, now he is being Rasul, like Abduhu wa Rasul, right? I just realized this part of why it is that when we look at regard him as worshipful servant, we see him as model of love, exemplar of mercy, glory of mankind. How it is the case? Like the second part, I can make sense easily, like easier as compared to the first part. When we regard him as messenger, we see him as the proof of God, the Lamb of truth, the sign of guidance, means to happiness. This part I can follow somehow, but why when we regard him as worshipful servant, why it is the case that we see him as glory of mankind, model of love, or example of mercy? Any idea?
In the first part, he was using tuples for the first sentence. He was saying that he is both he is the discoverer and proclaimer of infinite mercy. So discoverer is a personal thing for him, like that looks to his servanthood, but proclaiming, announcing looks to his duty as a messenger. So then he says, herald and observer of the beauties. So herald, again, announcing out of the beauties, but also he himself in the first place is an observer of those beauties. So discloser and displayer of the treasures of divine names. So he has both those two aspects, and he says if you focus on the first aspect, because now this person is an expert of reading the universe as well. Other than announcing what he reads, in the first place he is reading it, and now he is taking this as, if you look him while he is reading the universe, just from this perspective, then you will see him to be the model of love, exemplar of mercy, the glory of mankind, and the most luminous fruit of the tree of creation. I guess the last two is clear, like him being the glory of mankind and him being the most luminous fruit of the tree of creation. These are clear, right? Then the model of love, or the exemplar of mercy.
Can we, so following your logic, so when we take him as a human being, with all these needs and impotence, weakness, and then see the way he lives the life, how peaceful he is, how content he is. So is this exemplar of mercy? So what does it mean, exemplar of mercy? I guess we can take it as he's being merciful one way, or when I look at him, I see mercy. Like the way he lives his life, or the ways he sees the life, I see how merciful is the creator of the life he lives. So when I, for instance, as a simple example, when I study his life from a historical perspective, I see mercy there.
So can we say that, for instance, when I see the relation between cat and a kitten, it becomes like a, a model or the exemplar of mercy. It's a manifestation or an example of mercy in flesh and bones in front of me, and a little bit of fur. Cat and kitten. So now, Prophet's personal choices, because when we talk about his life, we are talking about a man with his choices, the way he lived his life. He becomes a mercy being manifested in flesh and bones. Because sometimes, just imagine yourself within your closer circles, someone who is like those very otherworldly people that it might be your grandmother, whatever. When you remember this person, you remember of mercy. So Prophet is, with his life, makes me realize that, and because mercy specifically tied it at the very beginning to the good news of eternal happiness. So the way that this person lived his life is really making me realize the eternal happiness, which is the pure mercy itself and pure love itself. So with the life that he was living, because he's not living a life of a single world. Because if a person has one world, then he or she has every right to be aggressive and trying to turn the corner short, whatever. But this is a person which has two lives, and with the comfort of this second life, he is living such a peaceful life. And with his life, he just becomes like, I am very much assured, and he becomes my guarantee, sort of, with his life, that there's going to be this eternal life. So looking at him and feeling like, okay, I mean, this man is a guarantee of my next life, as if because of his security, the way that he's living his life. So when I see him, I remember of my Creator's love to me, my Creator's love or mercy to me, or to humanity, to the existence.
And I guess in the same line, like anyone who puts the worship into my life would also bring the perception of the mercy. Like what I mean, when I see myself as a worshipper, I start seeing the mercy around me. So being merciful, I guess, is being worshipper is the way to reach the mercy, is the way to see the mercy. I can see that it's not about the messengership, but about the worship, because the mercy is something you can witness, you can experience. It's not something, somebody can tell you. Like you cannot tell me that life is good unless I live life as good. And when I worship, when I see as a worshipper, and the object of the worship is merciful, that's the reason I worship. So I guess worshiping and seeing the mercy is somehow related to each other. When you accept yourself as worshipper, you expect your weaknesses. You accept your weaknesses. You accept your desires and needs. And then you accept that they all being sustained. And when you see yourself as worshipper, and you worship for the eternal life to come, this is why you worship. So through your worship, you see eternal life. You see that it will be given to you. So he was worshipper, meaning he was thankful for the things he was sustained with. He was thankful for the good news he received. And through these, he lived the mercy in his life. He experienced the mercy in his life.
In a way, maybe we can extract Nursi's understanding of Abduhu wa Rasuluhu, because apparently, the way that he's using the words, Prophet being an observer looks to him realizing his ubudiyya, servanthood, and as if this consequently leads him to be the messenger again. So, in a sense, in other places, Nursi is also using the word translator for the messenger. He is really translating the meaning of existence to us. So how do you translate a word? To translate a text from one language to the other, you first read the source text, you understand what is going on in this text, and then you translate it to the target language. Because just knowing the dictionary meanings of the words doesn't help. You need to understand really the concept, what the author wants to say. Then you translate it to the target language. So you need to know the background and everything about the source. So the messenger is the one that announces, proclaims a message. So he, in the first place, must have understood what he was going to say. So, and how do you understand the message in the first place? You understand the message for yourself, and which is also the case for the messenger, through being an abd. So as much as you realize your neediness and impotence, then you start, or the universe starts revealing its secrets to you, or the creator starts telling you the secrets of divine names. So in the example of messenger, his servanthood led him to understand the secrets of the divine names and the universe and existence. And then for me, this became a mercy, just observing the scene, him being the servant, so that understanding the message. And then he declared the messages that he very well understood. And this is also a very good example for me. When I'm trying to say something, I should first understand what I am saying. I guess this is a good example for being how to invite people. Because he is inviting people to his message, but he is sure than his message more than anybody else in the first place. So he's not simply a postman delivery person, which is just saying like, okay, here is a letter I found, somebody gave it to me, but your name is written on top of it. So I guess taking messenger as such means that we do not say abduhu, we just say rasuluhu, without understanding that you cannot be a rasul without being an abd.
This is a good point. It goes back to what we discussed last week, right? Was it last week? About Newton and so he's being out, he's being a worshipper himself. Like he knew what he was saying. He lived what he was saying. All the message or what he said was directly coming from God, without being distorted and so on way to us. He lived the message. He asked for the message.
He was given the message because he was in need of the message. And he was cognizant of his need of message. Because the Creator is a wise one, so he doesn't give if there is no need. So you do not feed someone who is not hungry. You shouldn't be feeding. If you are a wise man, you shouldn't be feeding someone who is not hungry. So if a wise man is feeding someone, you would say that then this guy must be hungry or aware of his hunger. And actually this is now becoming a last point for myself, because here and there we are hearing people saying that the message was revealed to this person because he was a trustworthy person. He didn't understand the message well. In the latter ages, people understood the message much better than the messenger himself. He was just a simple but a very good character. People, this is why God has chosen him to reveal the message. But this is really missing a huge point about this person.
He's being abd worshiper.
Yes.
So it's really important when we say abduhu wa rasuluhu.
So just to summarize and make it like a formula, one cannot become a Rasul without becoming an Abd. An Abd in this sense that Abd is a person who realizes his or her neediness, and through this neediness realizes the secrets of divine names, which will then eventually lead them to take the responsibility of delivering those messages with the people.
And he says, the author says, he's the discoverer and proclaimer of an infinite mercy. So if you are not searching for something, you cannot discover something.
Yeah, good comments. Anybody else wants to comment? We have a few minutes left, inshallah. So I'm still thinking on how is meant by him being the model of love, the exemplar of mercy, the glory of mankind. So that's easy to understand, the glory of mankind. But so what is this love that he is a model of? And what is this mercy that he is an example of? Can somebody speak to that?
While people thinking about this question, I was about to ask something to Abdurrahman. Abdurrahman, do you have any questions that you want to share with us? I was
Are you fishing?
thinking about this.
Are you fishing?
No, seriously. Like, I'm sincerely asking, like, I was thinking Abdurrahman must have some questions, like, before we end the discussion. So I wanted to hear if you have any.
Not really. I mean, I'm just trying to understand it. And I guess if one question, here Nursi asked a question at the last sentence. So how is it that our evil commanding souls and Satan do not accept with all its degrees the basis of all such a being claimed that there is no God but God? Like I was just thinking, like, what is the answer to this? Because I mean, Awesome asked a question too. I don't want to skip that, but here, an evil commanding soul and a Satan, it should never accept this, anyways, right? Isn't that the whole point of it? That it won't accept it, and I mean, is our goal to try and make these things accept it, or try? I'm not sure what Nusri is asking here.
So you're saying he's calling them as evil commanding and Satan, and then expect them to accept the message. There's no God but him. That's a good point.
Because how I understand the soul is the soul doesn't listen to logic anyways. So like you could give it all the intellect and logic in the world, and your nefs is just not gonna care. It's just gonna do whatever it wants to do. And then Satan itself, if we take Satan to just look at the world in a worldly way and not see just one eye, just in a worldly way, then Satan will never see it either. So I'm not sure how this question is even making sense.
I guess one way to take it is, this is just, I'm thinking aloud. I'm already aware that this cannot be the answer, but I guess you can take it as emphasizing the disconnection between what our souls willing to have and what reality is. This is one way to take it, maybe. Or I guess it's interesting. He says, like, this message, or he, the prophet, quote unquote, conquered the whole of the world, fifth of the mankind, but still, we inside ourselves have struggled. Like, still he couldn't conquer us, conquered our evil commanding soul. So it was not enough for him to conquer the half of the world and the fifth of the mankind, to conquer our evil commanding soul. That's interesting. But I don't know, I don't have an answer.
What about the other question, the one I was asking, Berkan? So what is the love and the being the model, and what is the mercy?
I'm not sure. Maybe, I don't know, one way to see is how love and mercy, how they were manifested in his life. When we look at him as a human being, as a worshipper, who's aware of his weakness and desires and impotence, how we see the love and mercy was manifested in him, in his life. Or when we adapt ourselves and when we adopt his way of living, how we see ourselves as being bestowed with the love and mercy. Like his being an exemplar of the mercy, from my perspective, is one thing is when I look at him, the way he lived life, I see mercy there. And also another perspective, when I adopt his way of living, I become a worshipper myself. Now I start seeing the mercy in my life. How all my needs were or being sustained. How I am being loved, just like he was loved. And also how he was, like how he loved the creation. And when I become the worshipper, how I start loving creation. Like this is how I see.
Yeah, I was also thinking how the love can be like the satisfaction that we get through his message. That's what, the love would be. I'm also thinking out loud like you, and the message also brings me, mercy. Again, in terms of my human side really being convinced and being satisfied and really seeing that, that there is like the conclusion that he puts at the end, that there is no God but God, and that's how everything becomes like I can see this mercy, in that message itself. So in the message, there is mercy because it brings me the satisfaction. And there's love as well.
May I interrupt you for a second? I'm really sorry. Just clarification. Like, actually, what I meant is not looking to the messengership. It's not looking to the message. It's more looking to I'm being a worshipper, meaning I'm being needy. I'm being weak, and at the same time I'm being sustained. This relationship gives me the mercy, shows me the mercy and love. You are right, I'm not objecting what you said. There is also mercy and love in the message, and how satisfactory this message for us. This is true. But the aspect I was talking about, it's more about, not about the message or its satisfaction, but only about seeing myself as needy, seeing myself as being sustained by a master, by a dominical power. This is how I see the mercy. That's what I meant, Lord.
So the mercy you see, you're saying as a worshiper, the mercy, the infinite mercy, that the sustainership is being sustained is coming from some infinite mercy.
So the way I see the reality, like when I think about the worship, at least again, like when I think about it, so I guess I cannot worship someone or something that I don't see as merciful. I am worshiping because, I start realizing the mercy in my life. Or through worshiping, I start realizing the mercy in my life. It's not a relationship of, let's say, being afraid, a fear. I'm not worshiping because I am obliged to worship. I am worshiper because this is my state. This is what I am. And this state that I am in is manifestation of the mercy. Because worship means you are in communication with someone that can sustain you. someone that can listen to you. This is worship for me. And this is mercy. So when I see someone who is worshiper, a genuine worshiper, I see mercy in his life. This is what I meant.
Okay, good points to reflect on, alhamdulillah. So I think we can conclude here, inshallah, because I think the time is up.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.